Hey everybody, so we are going to be talking about points, lines, and planes. These are the undefined terms of geometry. This is also going to be your foundation for geometry, and pretty much any other math that you use from this point forward, they will refer back to these definitions. All right, so we're going to start off with point first. Now, a point is a precise location or place in space. The way that that's going to look is it's going to be a dot, and typically you need to have it labeled. So it needs to have one capital letter. That's how you name it. And it's only one capital letter. All right. Now the next set is collinear points. And you'll notice on the front right here, I've highlighted the word line. I recommend you do that too. It literally says co-line. We are on the line together. And what that means is two or more points that are on the same line. So the diagram for this is going to kind of look a little bit different than what you might be expecting. And that's because I want you to see something. If we've got, say, 3 points on here, and say I put a point up here, I'm going to label my points with capital letters because that's how you label points. In this scenario, in this diagram, only points A, B, and D are collinear because they are all making a line. Okay. Now, if we were asked, on a different plane, CD might work, but only ABD in this diagram. Speaking of, coplanar points. And you'll notice I put a little E over there in the plane part of it. And that's just because, well, you can't put an E and an A, and that's just grammar and spelling stuff. Now, these are 3 or more points that are on the same plane. When you draw a plane, it's kind of like when you're drawing a 3D cube or a 3D box on paper. We make it a little bit diagonal to show that this is a 3-dimensional space. This is a space in the 3D world. A plane, by the way, is something like, think about a Kleenex box. Those sides are called the faces, whereas the lines, those edges, those are where the planes intersect. They intersect on lines. Now, if you had something like this, I'm going to put, why not? A, B, C, D, E. Then on this one, the coplanar points would be A, B, C, E. That's because point D right here is outside of the plane. Coplanar, all on the same plane. Collinear, all on the same line. All right, now let's go to these right here. The first one that we're going to go to is a line. Now, a line, it's going to be drawn like this. We need at least 2 points to make a line. That is a postulate. It's an axiom. That means that is accepted without any argument. That is accepted as a statement of fact. And it is true, and we believe it. It's a definition, essentially. So, notice you need at least 2 points. When you are labeling it, when you are naming it and writing it out, you can just say line A, B, the 2 capital letters, or 2 of the many points that are on that line. You could also do, line BA, for example. Okay, you need at least, and I'm sorry, only 2 capital letters to name it. So for example, say if we had a point C in the middle, line AB would still be the appropriate name for this line. You could also say line AC or BC or CA or CB, whatever. Any of those variations could still work. Now, here's a little secret. Mathematicians, we're lazy. So if we don't have to write that much, we won't. In fact, when we have something like this, and you guys have seen this before, there we go. You just put a line with two arrows on it. That's what a line is. It's got two infinite ending. It doesn't end on both sides. It keeps going forever and forever. You could also symbolically write it like this, of course, because it's the same thing. Now there is one more way of doing this. You see this part right here? That lowercase cursive L? Lines are notated with lowercase letters. Not all of them, but most of the time they will be. And if that is the case, then you can write line L. And you'll notice that I make it a cursive lowercase l. That's because a lowercase l, like this one, can sometimes look like a 1. And so we don't want to confuse the two. It could also be capital I based upon how you write it. So remember, you can also have just one lowercase letter. But that does not mean that you could change these into lowercase letters. You cannot call this line A. That is not appropriate. If there was an A here, then you could do that. But that is not the case. All right, this next one. So let's talk about this next one, okay? The next one is line segment. Sometimes you're not going to be seeing it written that way. Sometimes you'll just see it written as segment. You need to be familiar with both. Okay, the way that you write a segment and is going to be very similar and almost exactly like a line, except it doesn't have a lowercase letter. So, say we've got this right here. That would be segment AB or segment BA. Because you could be standing here and looking at it, you go in B, then A. Or you could be standing here and then going A, then B. The way you would symbolically write it, AB, then BA, put a line over it. Now you'll notice these two have two finite defined, this is a defined term, ending points. We don't have to put the dot when we're drawing the symbol over it, because in case if you can't really tell that I'm even putting the dots there. So we don't do it. We just put the line over it, that bar. Okay. You'll notice that line segment AB is also technically part of line L. And that can happen. Now here's this next one, because this is also what can happen. This is a ray. Now a ray, it's kind of as if a segment and a line combined, or it's part of a line. Depends on how you want to look at it. I'm going to put 3 points on mine. And you know what? I'm going to draw it the other way too. Why not? Now, the way that you can write this and the way that you're going to have to start it with is it has to start with the end point first. Must start with end point. So what that means is no matter what, if you're saying it's ray C, then you can do B, or you can do ray CA. You have to start with your endpoint first. If I was to say ray BA, I'm only talking about this part. And I'm talking about a completely different ray, and I'm not including CB here. Now, the way that you notate that symbolically is you're going to write those two capital letters. Notice I'm not doing more than two still. And you draw an arrow towards the right. Even if they're going in a different direction, it doesn't matter. As long as your endpoint is here, then we know that's where your ray is. And that your endpoint is C and it goes to A. All right, so now let's check out this part right here. There are going to be a couple of different options that we can put in here, but we'll talk about some of the most basic ones. So two other names for line AB right here. So we want to include the arrows on this, which means we could also make it line BA, like we've been doing. But you could also call it line CA, AC, CB, or even BC. But notice this lowercase letter. You could just also call it line N. Okay, so those are all the different options, but know that you can always do 2 points, 2 capital points, or 1 lowercase letter for a line. Now, 2 other names for plane A. For planes, you can do, remember we said 3 or more points on the same plane, make it coplanar points. You need 3 points. So you could call this plane A, B, C, because those are all on the plane. Or you could also do plane A, B, E. Just because they're coplanar doesn't mean they have to be collinear. And you might have noticed this capital letter here just kind of floating without a point next to it. It's not a point. That's how you name a plane if it's given. Planes use 1 capital letter. Or 3 points. And you'll notice they called it plane A. Well, that was including 1 point. So we could also call this plane B, plane C, plane E. 3 points that are collinear, well, we talked about it. These are A, B, C. And the ones that are coplanar are A, B, C, E, because that's how we named our plane. Another name for line segment BC, well, it's just going to be going backwards, and it's going to be CB in the opposite direction. Speaking of opposite directions, we're talking about naming 2 rays with endpoint B. So I want to point out these 2 rays in particular, ray BA and ray BC. Those are opposite rays. Pretty much they're going in opposite directions. They make a line, but they are going in opposite directions of each other. Yes, ray BD is a thing, but that is not an opposite ray, and I wanted to show you opposite rays. I'm sorry. So I'm just going to write that in. And that's all I've got for you, right? Remember, planes intersect on lines or a line segment, because line segments are part of lines.